HTML5 website design tutorial. So today we're going to be talking about the basics of cascading style sheets, or CSS, a flexible cross-platform standards-based language developed by W3C. There are a few different types of CSS style sheets. There or different ways people can incorporate them. There's inline styles, which would be the CSS is in body with a tag on the HTML files. Embedded styles, which in the header of the page you use a style tag and include everything in there. And then there's external styles, which would be a separate file altogether, and we're going to go over all of these. But the first thing I want to talk about before we get started is style sheets are composed of style rules, and these describe the styling to be applied. Each rule has two parts, a selector and a declaration. A CSS style rule selector is the HTML element name, a class name, or an ID name. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I got Komodo Edit pulled up. This is our last example, and just to show you, this would be an embedded HTML right here. So I'm going to do style. Notice this is in the head tags at the top, and let's say I want to do body color blue. So this is right here. This is the selector, and a selector can be an HTML element name, a class name, or an ID name. And the declaration property, which is color, is what the properties I'm affecting with what I'm changing with my CSS. So this could be font size, font family, color, background color, things like that. So that would be the declaration, and this is the selector right here. And then blue is the value of the declaration right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Whoops. Go ahead and save this, and let's see. View this, and as you can see, it changed all of the text blue. It was black, and if you don't believe me, I can change all the text to yellow. Save that, and there we go. Except for the links, because the links are a little bit different. So awesome. So that's how that works, and this is called embedded style. So if you notice on this one looks exactly the same, because I have not styled this one. I've only styled this one in the head right here, the head section, and this one is also the same. Let's preview. Yep, it's also the same as well. So so this is the embedded style, and if I wanted to do an inline style, I could actually take this, copy. So I would do style equals color blue. And there we go. So that's called an inline style. And this is really bad practice. This is something you do in a pinch, or just kind of something you do just to kind of jimmy rig something real quick. This is not good practice, because then you'd have to do this on every HTML file. Same as this. This is only this embedded style where you have the style tags. This is only for a specific style on a specific page. So we're gonna do what's best, and we're gonna make an external CSS styling sheet, which is gonna affect all of my pages. And then if a page needs further styling, then I'm gonna do an embedded style. And you know, every once in a while, if one particular element or something needs inline, then I'll do an inline style. But that's super, super rare. So we're gonna go ahead and make a styling sheet for everything. But one more thing I wanted to mention before we do that is using color on web pages. So monitors display color as a combination of different intensities of red, green, and blue, a concept known as RGB color. RGB intensity values are numerical form from 0 to 255. Each RGB color has 3 values, one for red, green, and blue. And the combination of these different values is what makes the color. So colors are numerical values as well. So you could, you notice I typed in blue. If I want a different shade of blue, or if I wanted to type in blue but not, type in the word, I could type in hashtag 000FF. And these are hexadecimal is the name for the base 16 numbering system, which uses characters 0 all the way to F to specify numeric values. And hexadecimal color values specify RGB colors. So that's why you see numeric pairs ranging from 00 to FF, which would be 0 to 255 in base 10, which is what we typically count numbers in. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a color chart. I'm here at computerhope.com. This is their HTML color codes and names. And there's a lot of websites that have something similar, but I think Computer Hope is that's what I meant. Computer Hope is the one that that is most popular for this. So, it says right here, HTML color codes are hexadecimal triplets representing colors in red, green, and blue. So each two, this would be red, this would be green, this would be blue. So FF would recommend, F is 15 in hexadecimal. So this represents 255 in red, 0 in green, and 0 in blue. And if you're not familiar with hexadecimal numbers, that's okay. I mean, you don't have to be right now. You could watch a tutorial on it and understand it in 2 minutes. It's not complicated, but the biggest thing to understand is colors are represented in hexadecimal when you're working with CSS, or you could type in the name for some of them. So for the major colors, you could type in the name. But when you get to things like this, you might want to use gunmetal or charcoal on your website. Then you're going to have to use the actual number. And as you can see, there's, all types of different colors. And these are, you could actually get even more specific than this. You can get into different shades of sapphire, different shades of blueberry blue, and things like that. So you could see, for the most part, this should be good for everyone's color needs, especially now when you're first starting. But all of these are represented by hexadecimal numbers. Alrighty, so before we start working with an external style sheet, let's go ahead and style the main page we got here. So I'm going to go ahead and style the body, and this is how you do this. As you can see, my text editor already created a closing bracket, and I'm going to go background, color, and I got these colors written down already. I found a good color scheme. E6, E6FA, and then color, hashtag 191970. And there we go. So we'll go ahead and save this and see what it looks like. And as you can see, it changed the whole color of the background color, and then it changed the color of the actual text itself, which is very cool. So if you notice, I could actually do this, save, and it makes no difference. So there's nothing sensitive about this, but as long, I could actually even go like this. I have that down there. I could save, and there you go. But it's good practice to have things in a nice, neat order, just so you, the developer, can see things better. But let's say I was to miss this colon right here, and I was to save that. It's giving me a little error up here, but not everything has this. You might have Notepad, and sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. But right here, you can notice the color is black, which is the default color, and that is because I missed my colon right here. So I put my colon back, and let's go ahead and start opening it up in the Komodo tab. And now everything works fine, which is great. So, yeah, it's nice to have an editor where you can open in different browsers, or you can open it up in the actual tab itself. So, yeah, we got the body. Now we're going to do the H1. And as you can see, I'm styling by element here. I just list the element, and then I put 2 brackets. So background, color, cool color for this one too. If I know. And it's actually the same exact colors as these, but opposites, which is good for it's visually appealing. So let's check this out. I did Command Save, and cool. So you could see this is much easier to see. This stands out. This I could tell this right here is the header. It stands out, and this is all about good web design practices. And the best way to learn is to just do it like we are now. And then I'm going to style the H2. So background, color, AED for color is going to be 191970. And you notice everything is in the head and in the style tags, okay? That's super important. You know, if I were to put this stuff in the body or something, it wouldn't work. And awesome, so this is even better. So we could tell this is the header. We could tell this is kind of a subheading. Here's a little bit of description. And then here's our footer. You know, it's nice and small. You could tell it's the footer. And I could tell this is my navigation. Look, there's links. And let's say we were to go to services. It doesn't have any styling. That's because I only am doing embedded. If we look at our code, the style is only on my index.html. It's not on contact, and it's not on services. But what we're going to do is we're going to put this on an external style sheet, and all three of these are going to link to it, and then they're all going to be styled. If we change that style sheet, they're all going to change. Okay, so now we're going to work on fonts. And the two main font family categories would be serif and sans serif. Serif fonts have small little tails on the end of the letter stroke. So think of Times New Roman, Georgia, fonts like that. And these are typically fonts you want to avoid on the internet. I think personally, and a lot of people agree, that sans serif, which have no tails, are much easier and cleaner to read on the web. So we're going to go ahead and change all of the font in the body. So right here I have my colors. So it's good practice to go to a new line, and I'm going to do tab. So get in line with these. I'm going to go font family Arial sans serif. So this particular example, they want to use sans serif. So what's happening here is I'm establishing I want to use this font. If the browser doesn't have it, then it's going to go to this one. And if it doesn't have that, it's going to use whatever default sans serif font that it has. These are all sans serif fonts, okay? Another property would be font size. And this is where you can change the font size with a text value, the pixel, the numerical value, such as a 10 pixel font size, the point unit, the EM unit, which is something that's popular, which would be like a percentage, and then there's actually a percentage value as well. So if that's kind of sounded confusing, we're about to go over it. Another property is called the line height property, and this modifies the default height of a line of text and is often configured with a percentage value. So 200% to configure the text to appear double spaced. The space is above the lines. The text align property configures the alignment of the text and inline elements within block display, such as headings, paragraphs, and divs. So this will align the text within that display that it's in. And then text indent, it's pretty self-explanatory. It indents text. And decoration, text decoration, is to modify the display of the text. And so this would refer to none, underline, overline, or line through. So if you wanted to have a line that goes through your text to make it look like it's marked out, you could use a text decoration property. But we'll go over all of this. But I'm going to go ahead and get back to working on our example. And one thing I wanted to say is HTML and CSS is, you know, the basics. You get down the basics from working with it, but it is full of just tons of elements and tags and properties, and you're going to have to look this stuff up. You know, if you want to figure out how to underline something, all you got to do is just Google how to underline in CSS, and something will come up on the first page, and it'll just be that tag, and then you just use that or that property. So this stuff, once you know the basics, you could pretty much do whatever you want by just Googling. And people that are even seasoned vets have to Google things all the time. It's not a big deal. So we're going to go ahead and work on H1 so you can see. I'm going to go line, height, 200%, and then font, family, Georgia, Georgia, Times New Roman, and serif. Okay. Now for H2, font, family, text align center. And then I'm also going to configure the paragraphs. So P, which is the element, the paragraph element, which I'm going to configure. Font. Ooh, what is that? Font. Size. 0.90 EM. That's what this resource I'm looking at is using. So text indent would be 3 EM. And you kind of get a feel for these measurements by just using them. There's no, exact, science to this stuff. You could read about it, and that helps. Then I'm going to configure the unordered list. So UL font weight bold. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we'll check this out. Wow, that looks great. If you notice, all the fonts have changed accordingly. You got your sans serif here, you got your serif down here, and yeah, everything looks great. So we're going to, I'm going to add a list to this to just add some more content. All right, guys, so very quickly, I just added this little list that I forgot to add for this particular example. So this is supposed to be a part of this example, so now we're all caught up, and I hit this little world thing, and I look at this, and wow. So we got my list, nice and bold, and if you look at this thing, I mean, this looks totally different than what we had earlier. If I were to take out, all of this, so I'm going to copy all this, get rid of it, save this document, open it back up. This is what we had before. And then we add the style, save, open it up, and this is what we have now. So, and if you guys are just now watching this, I'm hitting this little world here. This is what I have in my editor. This is my view in browser. If you don't have this and you're just using like Notepad++ or something, all you got to do is just click on the HTML file and it opens. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of that, and you could also open with a particular browser that you have, and it's good to have all the browsers. I don't have them right now because I have a different way of checking it, but it's okay. So we have everything configured, and yeah, so we're gonna go. One more thing I gotta mention is there is a hierarchy of what a element, what property it will take on when you style it. So for example, right now, this is my embedded style at the head, okay? This takes precedence over an external style sheet. So let's say my external style sheet has a background color of, yellow. This will take precedence over that. And then if I do it inline, this will take precedence over this and that and the external style sheet, which I'm going to show you soon. So it's called linking to a style sheet. We haven't not done that yet, and I keep talking about it, but we're about to do it. So if I had right here, style equals color. Let's say, yellow. Everything in the body is going to be yellow. You see that? That takes precedence over, let me get this set up. This right here takes precedence over this color here, because this is an inline style. I'm changing this directly in here. Now, a style sheet, this would take precedence over that and this, okay? So just know there's a hierarchy there. So I'm gonna get rid of this, just so you know. So let's say you have your body changed on here, and you want to change just like one element. Let's say I want to change just the color of this div only. Then I would do an inline right there for that one only. You don't have to change it up here, because then it would change all your divs, right? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is CSS class ID and contextual selectors. The use of a CSS selector is when you need to apply a CSS declaration to certain elements on a web page and not necessarily tie that style to a particular HTML element. An ID selector is to identify and apply a CSS rule uniquely to a single area on a web page. And we're going to see examples of both of these. An example of an ID selector would be the footer. That's a unique area of a web page. The use of a class would be, let's say we have a certain feature that we're going to add to our page, and then that one would have its own styling. So we're going to go ahead and make a class for the navigation, because right now it could definitely stand out better than it does. Navigation is important. So for our classes, we're gonna we're making up a name. So I can name this anything. So you have to identify a class initially with a dot. So I'm gonna name this nav, just because that's good for our purpose, because we're going to fix the navigation. I could name this dog or cat or whatever, but that doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna do nav. Font, weight, bold, and font size 1.25 EM. We're going to go ahead and save that and open this. And yeah, see, it's not working. You know why? Because we have not included it yet. So we're going to go to right here, our div. Remember what divs are used for? They section off a little area. This is our div that sectioned off our little nav. Remember the wireframe I showed you earlier? So we're going to go div class equals nav. Save that. Now it works. You see that? So let's say we were going to change the name to cat. It doesn't work. That's what we had earlier. But if we change this to cat, now it works. But the thing is cat doesn't make sense. So it's always good to use things that make sense. But sometimes people get confused and think that's the only name you could use. I mean, to be honest, this is the name you should use. So I highly recommend it. So this little div, all divs do is just section off areas of code. And then you will use CSS to style those sections. That's essentially what you use divs for. So this is a class, and I'm using this on my nav. And let's say I want another class called feature where I'm going to feature certain things in my list. You know, I might want them to stand out more than others. So I'm going to change the color of those. I'm going to do color FF1234, right? Because there's 6 and it has decimal for RGB. So there's feature. And let's say I want, let's say I want usability studies to stand out. So I'm going to go class equal feature. And then let's say I want search engine optimization to stand out as well. So I'm going to go class equal feature. Save. And there we go. These are both red now. You see that? This is a class, and this took precedence over the styling that I gave to the body, the color of the body. You see that? So that's what these are used for. The classes and IDs are used to change things even more directly. Okay? So now we're going to make an ID. So those both are classes which use dots. And now we're going to do an ID. And you can name an ID whatever you want either, too, also. But we're going to do footer because that's a good name. That's pretty much what everyone uses. That's pretty much the standard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the color we're going to use for the footer. Font size equals 0.75 EM. And if you're confused about, this EM, the font sizes and things like that, you can Google you can Google font size CSS and read about it on a website, and it will go into detail explaining all the different things you could use. You could use PX for pixels, like 10 PX, but I'm just using EM because I think it's the best one. And the example that I'm following that I did earlier also used EM. So for me, best thing to use right now. Font style, italic. Sweet. So if I was to misspell italic, it wouldn't work. So if we look at our footer, it's not working, right? Because we did not include it. So we have to go down to footer, and you see we have a div here, which sections off this little area. And we're going to go, let's see here, ID equals footer. And we're going to get rid of this little small tag because we don't need it anymore because we changed the font size on our own. So you see, a lot of the HTML you learn, you're really going to end up not needing, which is why I try not to teach too much of the garbage, because you're actually just going to use CSS. And if you see, footer's nice and small. Font size, it's italic. It's a little bit different color. Little stands out a little bit more. I'm going to change your name here. It's kind of goofy. I'm just going to change it to my own name. Sweet. All right. One last element. It's called the span element. And if you recall from earlier that the div element configures a section or division on a web page with an empty space above and below, the div element is useful for when you need to format a section that is physically separated from the rest of the web page, referred to as block display. In contrast, this new element that I'm going to be talking about, called the span element, defines a section on a web page that is not physically separated from other areas. This formatting is referred to as inline display. Use the span tag if you need to format an area that is contained within another, such as a paragraph, block quote, or div tag. So span is for things that are not separated. So this right here, this is separated. This is the navigation. This right here, this is separated. This is the footer. You remember that wireframe I showed you earlier, how we set up our website? So these things are supposed to be separated. Span is for when things are not supposed to be separated, but you need to have them in a little container to style them. So we're going to make a new class called company name, and font weight is going to be bold. Font font family is going to be Georgia Times New Roman. And don't ask me why Times New Roman's in parentheses. I'm not sure. That's just the standards. I don't make them. And then serif. Then font size 1.25 EM. I think it's because Times New Roman is several different words. So then anytime a font is several different words, you put them in quotations. And we save that. Is it going to work? No. Why? Because we have not included it. The reason I'm doing this is because it's really important to learn how to include this stuff. Okay, so we're going to span this right here. So we're going to do span class equals company name. And you notice it automatically did that for me, which is helpful sometimes, but other times it's not. And this is just the company name that I want to span. I want to, edit this. There we go. It does automatically. So save, command save, and it's not working. Let's see what we did wrong. All right. Well, first of all, if we look at this has 3 S's. It's kind of weird, so I need to fix that. Okay, span class, company name. I'm going to pause this and figure out what's wrong. Okay, guys, so I figured it out. So right here, I spelled company wrong. And there we go. So now Trillium Media Design has all of this right here, all of this style. Okay, so to recap, P sections off the paragraph. I use span just to section off something within that paragraph, So this is not separate, but I want to style it separate. So that's what that is. A div actually separates things into its own little section, just like a paragraph does as well. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to use external style sheets, which I've been talking about the whole time, but we have not even used them yet. So these are extremely flexible, extremely powerful, and best utilized, most of the time. And you're going to use a link element to link to it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. And this is going to include everything in here. Copy. I'm going to get rid of it all. And I'm going to put it all in here. And I'm going to save this as style.css, which is typical. I'm going to save it in my HTML folder, all files. It's typical, and you see my text editor recognizes it as a CSS file, which is Cascading style sheet. Okay, cool. So we're going to link that in the header to all 3 of these so they all have styling. Because, if you recall, if I open this, it, still looks like that. So it'll link to something in the header. We're going to go link. And that just tells it that it's a style sheet. And then href equals, this is actually my relative link. It's going to be style.css. Oops. Command save. So if we open this up, this is styled. This is not styled. And you know why? Because it's not linked. So we have to link all of them. So we're going to go to the header, paste, save. Paste, save. Okay, so I'm opening this up. This is styled, this one's styled, and this one's styled. And if you notice, only the menu for this one is styled. And that's because if you remember, we did this nav class on the first one, and we haven't done it on this one yet. Just like we have with the footer with the ID, and that's okay. We could do that later. Let's just go ahead and do it now. So I'm gonna copy class nav, copy, and I'm gonna put that in here and save it, and I'm gonna put it in here and save it. Then I'm gonna go to the footer, ID footer, copy, and I'm gonna save it. And actually I need to get rid of this small as well. And since this is gonna be completely the same, what's actually smarter to do is just copy this whole thing. Oh, something's wrong. There we go. Whoops. It's smarter to copy this whole thing. And I need to save this first. And get rid of this. And save. Cool. So now if we let's go to this one. So now if we click these, they're all the same. You see that? And that's the way to do it. Okay, so far you learned how to center text on a web page earlier in the chapter, but what about centering the entire web page itself? A popular page layout design that is easy to accomplish with just a few lines of CSS is to center the entire contents of a web page within a browser viewport. The key is to configure a div element that contains or wraps the entire content. So what we're going to do is right here at the body, at the very beginning, we're going to create a div. Whoop, div. Cool. Get rid of this, and then right at the top here, I'm going to close that div. Awesome. And this is going to have an ID called wrapper. Okay, and so I need to create the ID in here. So I'm going to keep my IDs together, my classes together. Wrapper. Cool. So I'm going to do width, which is the width of the entire web page itself. 100 pixel or 700 pixels wide, which if you're not familiar with pixels, then I recommend Googling it. Margin left, auto, margin right, auto. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open this right here. And as you can see, if I make it bigger, the margin is this area on the left and right of the browser, okay? And you could set the margin, you could set the actual pixels you want, but if you put it to auto, what it does is calculate the margin space, and it divides it by 2 and puts an equal amount on each side. So 700 pixels wide is how much width of the website we have to work with right now. And screens have gotten so much bigger. This is an older example. 700 pixels wide used to be a good number that would fit on just about every screen, but now people have 15-inch wide laptop screens and stuff. So people typically do 180 pixels is like the standard now. But for this example, this is good for our purpose. Well, that concludes the basics of CSS and HTML. We'll take one last look at our website. That's a pretty good website. I mean, for a business or company, I mean, obviously you'd want to put some information on these right here, But yeah, I mean, I could totally, if a local pizza shop had this and they had their hours and contact number and their menu and stuff like that, I mean, this is a totally usable, helpful website you could create with just knowing a little bit of HTML and CSS. You can create something like this, and you can change the colors and things like that. And then next, we're going to learn how to add logos and header images at the top and cool things like that. But one more thing I want to make sure everybody knows before we leave is the Cascade. So there's rules of precedence. So at the very beginning, the browser defaults is what is going to happen with your website. And then the external style sheet, which is this, right? I already talked about this a little bit. And then if I want to change something in here, that's going to take precedence over that. Just like this takes precedence over the browser defaults. And then if I want to do inline styles, then that's going to take precedence. Okay? So if I remember, I showed earlier. And then HTML attributes. So using like the small element down here in the footer, that would take precedence over this. So that's how everything works. That's called the Cascade, cascading styled sheets. Just know that most of the time you're going to have an external style sheet, and when you change this, it changes everything else. And you could always, you could have several style sheets you link to. You don't have to have just one. If you need to change something specific, you go in here in the style tags, and it's something really specific, you do it inline.
Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for future video notifications. Feel free to donate by clicking the PayPal donation link below in the description. Visit our website at freecomputerhelp.net for programming tips, installation guides, and more.